Hey, what's going on? My name is Chris Phillips, and I want to welcome you to Elevate Your Leadership podcast, where we talk all about elevating your leadership so you can elevate the leadership of those around you. Can't wait to talk today about generational leadership. Let's go. Hey, come on. Sorry, the music gets me hype every time. Adam, what's going on? My name is Chris Phillips. This is Elevate Your Leadership podcast. The host of your podcast is myself, Chris Phillips, lead pastor here in Denver, Colorado. One church, multiple locations. God's been doing some great work here, but I'm also joined by my co-host, Adam Pelham. Adam, say what's up.
What's up? Let's get it.
Adam, let's add something new to the podcast this time.
Okay.
Can we do a heat check? Heat check on
I'm
the
always
shoes?
down for a heat check.
Always down for it? Okay.
Especially when we match.
We didn't do this on purpose, but they're both great. So Adam, you go first.
Okay, little Jordan 1 low.
Ooh, okay.
This is really a summer shoe.
Yeah, it's not
But
summer.
you know what? I'm inspired. It's been like 65 here in Denver the last few days. I'm like, I want it. So, little Jordan 1 low bleach coral. Something slight,
all right. And I've got the Jordan 1 highs, which is how you should be wearing them.
Can't all be highs.
With the coral laces on them and the coral on the top as well, too. Let's go retro! So dropping the heat today. Hey, look, I'm really excited about this one. I think, Adam, even you and I sitting at this table really bring a lot to this conversation, because last time on the show we had Libby, my wife, who was talking about leading the next generation because she's a school teacher. And so how that works as a mom and as a school teacher, and even in the church setting. But today we're going to be talking about generational leadership because I think a lot of times, man, I don't care if you're in the workplace. I don't care if you're in the church setting. I don't care if you're in the marketplace, the secular, church setting, regardless of where you are. If you are going to be a leader, you're going to have generational leadership.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be able to lead people in your generation. You're going to have to be able to lead people in the generation behind you and generations behind you. But then you're also, if you're a great leader and you have people that are on your team, you're going to have to lead people of generations that are ahead of you as well.
Yeah.
And so I think generational leadership is something that we don't really talk about enough, because what we do is we just want to go in and start leading people that are like us or behind us that keep us young, or whatever that may be. And that's really not the biblical model. And I think some of the best leadership that we see in all of the world comes from the biblical model of leadership, because Jesus is one of the greatest leaders that ever walked the face of the earth. And so today we are going to be talking about generational leadership. Now, here's let's just identify some generations first. Okay. So let's go. Maybe you're listening, watching with us. You're probably not watching because YouTube and some other things are not your thing, because you're the silent generation. Right. And that's born between 1925 and 1945.
They're used to the good old radio, so they like it in the ears.
They're listening. Are we streaming on radio at any point? Man, okay, we're going to get there for the silent generation. Yeah. I shouldn't be joking, but this, for real, right? Like 1925 to 1945, that's the silent generation, right? Then you go to the baby boomers. We got some boomers that are on here, right? 100%. Facebook, full of boomers.
For sure.
Facebook is full of boomers. That's 1946 to 1964. Then you have Generation X. Let's go for the Xers out there.
Shout out
to
Xers, man.
Like our executive pastor here at the church, Tim Corbin, straight up Xer.
Through
and through, man. He is the picture of an Xer. And he lived in Seattle, which also makes me think there's a little bit more edge to that too, right? For sure. So that's born between 1965 and 1980. Then you're going to have millennials, right? There's some debate around this, in standards. And by the way, you can find different age ranges for all of this. Millennials are 1981 to 1994, right? So shout out to the millennials that are out there.
Let's go.
And then you have Gen Z. Gen Z is 1995 to 2000, right?
Okay. They call us the golden generation.
No, they call you Gen Z. That's actually what they call you. And we're not really sure what to call you yet, because we're still trying to figure it out. And then you have what they're calling Generation Alpha, right? A lot of this is as it goes. We can look back retrospectively on some things, but Generation Alpha would be 2000 to 2015. Now, can I just make fun of myself for a minute?
Absolutely.
So I'm what's called a Zenio.
Okay.
Which I was born in 1980. So there's some dynamics around this between like when you were born and the influence of technology. The reason the years are becoming shorter in generations is because of the influence of technology and how much that impacts a generation, right? So 1980 is weird, right? Really what they've done is they kind of moved back and they have this like subsect of millennials and Xers, and they're calling it a Zenio, right? And so they would say it's between like 1978 and 1982. So you're right in the middle of it, right? So you were born where, you know, technology wasn't the end all be all, but you were still young enough when technology was around that like you're really in tune with technology, right? And so you have that now. The term that they came out with a little bit later was geriatric millennial.
How does that make you feel?
Womp, womp, womp. Like it's a great place for a sound clip, right? It makes me feel terrible. I'm a Zennial, not a geriatric millennial. Okay, I don't want to be geriatric anything,
no.
right? We'll leave that for the silent generation and everybody else. Whoops, silent generation. I love you. I just want you to know that. And so so I'm technically a Zennial. Adam, what are you?
I'm a little weird as well.
No.
I mean, I like to
own it.
You know, I'm on that cusp again of millennial Gen Z on the other side.
Yeah.
So depending on your studies, right, they all say the same thing. This one we got goes to 94. I was in 96.
Yeah.
I've seen some where it's like if you can remember 9/11, you're more of a millennial. I remember parts of it. I remember getting out of school and I was like, oh, this is. I didn't really remember the gravity of it. Yeah. And then I'm kind of weird. You know, I grew up with two older brothers that were a little
significantly older.
Significantly older. So like I kind of like resonate towards that late 80s, 90s vibe that millennials do more so than maybe other people my age.
Okay.
Like Michael Jordan's the GOAT, you know,
Always.
I can't. So like I'm in that kind of weird space. So I'm the same way. I'm kind of that weird hybrid.
By the way, that's a whole generational like conversation too, right? I mean, like you have such a generation that's like, hey, and I kind of like hey, can we just have generational goats? I saw something the other day, generational goats.
I'm for that.
I was like, oh, dude, I'm all in on generational goats. And so Adam is the Gen Z generational goat. And so that's enough. So here's the thing, man. When you are leading and you're leading at high levels, you've got to be able to lead multiple generations, which means you can't say, oh, it's my generation, we're the best. You know, everybody in their generation thinks their generation is the best. Here's a cue. Your generation's not the best.
Right.
Every generation is different. Like there's good and bad about every generation, and it ebbs and flows. And if you are going to be a leader, if you're already a high level leader, or by the way, if you're trying to be a high level leader, you better be able to lead multiple generations, because no matter what you go into, there's multiple generations. Libby was on the show last time. She's a teacher, right? You have young teachers, you have teachers that have been there for a while, you have administration, you have everybody else. When you walk into that marketplace, like you've got to be able to lead multiple generations, right? You have teachers that have been there for 20, 30 years. Then you have teachers that this is their first year teaching, and then you have everything in between. By the way, you also have students that are there that you have to lead as well, which is the next generation, right? I mean, if you're in sales, right? Whether it's pharmaceutical sales or IT sales or whatever it is, you're going to call on one account that's got a certain amount of people that are in there that are a certain generation. Then you're going to have another account that's got people in another generation, right? You've got to be able to cross all of those generations if you're going to be successful at leading at any of those levels. And so if you are going to elevate your leadership, I really would encourage you and implore you to like really hone into how do we lead multiple generations, right? One of my favorite kind of just realizations that like wasn't as good as I thought I was, and my generation is not as good as I thought I was, is I was a young pastor, pastor on staff. This was like my first year as pastor on staff at a church in Tennessee. And I had just come out of the medical sales world, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm still thinking I'm pretty good, you know, and everything. And so I walk in, and one of the things, the church that we were part of was very multi-generational, right? So I'm at birth to death, right? Which is awesome. Like, by the way, heaven, multiple generational, like it's multi-generational, right? Multicultural, multi-generational. Right. And so this church was that way. And so we walk in, and they wanted me to present just my story, like my testimony, my story to some people that have been around the church for a while. These people had a name for themselves. This is their name.
All right.
I'm not making this up, and I'm not making fun of them. I just want, be clear. They had logos, like some of them had jackets and a couple of polos with like this logo on it, right? This was their self-proclaimed name. They were the Romeos. Romeos stands for Retired Old Men Eating Out. They were the Romeos.
I love it.
Listen, and so like every Tuesday morning at Danvers in Memphis, Tennessee, 7 a.m., the Romeos met. And so the day that I went there were like 30. Yeah. And so 30 men, Romeos, retired old men eating out, 7 a.m. every Tuesday. And they wanted me to share my testimony, and I was broken. And here was why. I was like 31, 32 at the time, and not even 31, 32. I was probably, I was right around 30, 31. And I sat there, and as I was sharing my testimony with them, I looked across the room. I just stopped, and I just thanked them. And I said, hey, you all have been faithfully walking with the Lord longer than I've been alive. Woo. Like faithfully walking with God, serving in a local church, leading at high levels, married to their spouse, kids, grandkids, and everything else longer than I had been alive. Who in the world am I to think that I have everything under control?
Yeah.
And that was like a real defining moment for me. I love multiple generations. As we came into the Riverside piece downtown, it was taking over an older church in nature, right? The church had been declining for a while. The attendance was older and everything else. And I told that story to a lot of them. I said, hey, actually, the older generation is some of my favorite generations.
Yeah.
The realness, the authenticity, just the ability to say, I've been there, I've done that, I've walked through some really challenging times is just something to me that means a lot. And so we have to respect generations in a way that I don't think we see in culture a whole lot, right? Ageism and everything else is really real.
For sure.
But we need to respect those generations. Adam, talk about any type of time that you've been around different generations, whether younger or older or any of that, just not your typical Gen Z or millennials, but like, how have you been around different generations and what impact has that had on you today?
Yeah, I always try to, I think the base of what I try to do is learn from each generation.
Yeah.
Even, I serve as our student director here, and even from those generations, learning from those younger, learning from those older. I think if we have that mindset, it's similar to what we've talked about in previous episodes of always wanting to learn.
Yeah.
Leaders are always learners from any generation.
Yeah.
And so I think if we have that mindset, you can start to see where the other generations are coming from a little bit. Learning, from what's coming and learning from the generation behind you as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's good. One of the scariest verses in all the Bible for me, like all of the Bible, scariest verses. You've got Moses, who leads Joshua at a very young age, right? And honestly, it's fun. I love watching that journey. And it's like, I mean, he came in as a young, and Moses just took him under his arm, you know, I mean, and Joshua's coming out like he's the guy, like he's all this kind of stuff. And then you get there, and then the transition happens to Joshua. And it's like, all right, you have all of this, but then here's the scariest verse. It's in Judges 2:10. And in Judges 2:10, it talks about the leadership transition, and then it says, and all that generation also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. Wow.
Yeah.
Because of a lack of people leading and developing and engaging the next generation, and because of the generations ahead of the other ones not doing these things, there was a whole generation that did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. And it's funny, like where we are, even in the state of America, I look at some of this and I go, there's a lot of people to blame. Like if we're not happy with where we are, there's a lot of people to blame. Some of that's on the generations that should know better. Like we're not void of understanding what we need to do.
Sure. But
also there's a little responsibility on the older generation that says, hey, it's not just about, you learning this on your own, but I should have walked alongside of you, trained you, discipled you, mentored you, and all of this. I think of some of the people that I know that, have had some big failures in their leadership. Some of it just boils down to lack of mentorship in their life. I'll be honest, Adam, you know this because you're around me a lot. I think one of the reasons that I have some solid foot, on the ground and some solid footing, here and doing what God has called us to do is because I have a bunch of mentors that are older than me that have poured into me and that I have regular monthly calls with and regular weekly check-ins with and all this kind of stuff. I'm always asking their questions. These are people that have like trailblazed ahead.
Right.
And I'm going, hey man, you've been here, done this, got the shirt to prove it, scars to prove it and everything else. Can you help me out?
Yeah.
And, we got to be able to learn from multiple generations. And the awesome thing is that those guys are taking their time to pour into and invest in an idiot like me. It's like, I mean, they're like this dude. I can imagine they're like, Phillips, man, what a moron.
He's asking this again.
Yeah. How many times have I told him this? Right. And so just those people that, man, like Steve Stroop and guys like Vance Pittman and some of these guys that like, man, they are incredible leaders that I'm just so grateful to be around. Steve Gaines and some other people that it's like, okay, I'm learning from these guys.
Yeah.
How about you, Adam? Is there anything that like scares you about the lack of continuity between generations and pouring into, investing in? Is there anything you see from your Gen Z millennial generation that you're like, I wish you geriatric millennials and Gen Xers would do this?
Yeah. I definitely think that our generation is one of the more volatile generations when it comes to the thing, like the okay boomer kind of mindset. My generation coined that, right? But it's like phrase. It's true, yeah.
Great
like
phrase.
Some of the blinders are on, I think, coming from a Gen Zer, that maybe we can't see their side of things, and I don't know if that's like social media coming into play there.
Yeah.
I don't know, if that's just. I don't know, but it's definitely there.
Yeah.
And I think again, if you, it goes back to what I said earlier. If you have the mindset of I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm talking about, and these people don't. If you don't have a mindset of trying to really learn and listen, then that's going to happen. And you are going to get in that mindset of, my generation knows what to do.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier, like my dad's generation, right? I don't even know, like pre-internet, how did you book a flight?
Listen,
right? Like there's things that I need to learn.
I'm not even gonna lie. Hey, here's Adam's direct quote. He said, I was telling my dad, like it's not that hard. You have your phone, you do everything. He said, it's got to be way easier than when you like called airlines and had to get like an actual printed ticket.
Right.
That was way harder than it is now.
For sure. It's funny how, different generations have different challenges, right?
Yeah.
What I think is easy might not be easy for somebody else.
Yeah.
What they think is easy, I don't even, what even is a yellow page,
Libby
right? Or a phone book.
A couple of years ago, Libby and I were walking through, I was 40 at the time, and we were walking through how she and I dated long distance in the beginning of our relationship. And I told them long distance, which first off, they were like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I meant like, like we were a long distance away from each other.
Yeah.
And we were talking about phones. And I was like, when we first started dating, we could only talk nights and weekends. And they were like, why?
Unless you want to pay.
Why would you only talk nights and weekends?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, because you had to pay to talk on your cell phone to any area code that was not in yours. And they were
crazy.
like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh my gosh, you didn't know this? I was like, oh yeah, like we couldn't just text endlessly and there was no unlimited. It was like an arm and a leg to do this. And we were also on AOL Instant Chat Messenger a little bit, we were there. They were like, what?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this is before all of the technology. And so it's like, it's different challenges. And
For
so
sure.
here's the deal. I've got 4 ways that you can work with multiple generations and do it well. I think God has uniquely placed me in a couple of situations where like I've always been with multi-generational type of people, and I've always just had a heart for multiple generations, right? I love older generations and the experience that they have, but I also love the next generation. I love pouring into and investing in them. And so 4 ways that you can really begin to like really work cross-generationally, if you will. And the first one is this: identify that there's differences. Like you got to know those. Like you need to know why the silent generation is called the silent generation, why baby boomers are called baby boomers, right? I mean, like Gen Xers and all these things, like there's uniqueness to them, and we need to know those differences that are there, right? If we don't acknowledge and understand and know the differences, then we're just going to be going into it with our own mindset, right? And by the way, Adam, not everybody thinks like and talks like and makes decisions like me.
Right.
And so I've got to be able to do this in my leadership anyways. But really, I need to do it when I'm walking into a room where there's multiple generations in there. I got to know that this generation is thinking of this because of these reasons. And I got to know that this generation is skeptical of this because of these reasons, right? And so if I don't even know the differences myself within the generations and why people react and respond the way that they do, I'm setting myself up for failure, in leadership, right? An older generation is going to be much more stringent on like finances and things like that because of all that they had to walk through and experience with finances. And so it's like, hey, there's going to be some skepticism there, and it's like, hey, that's rightful. in their mind because of what their experience is. So I need to address that and handle it ahead of time. I'm not going to be able to do that if I don't know the differences, right? So if I can't understand the differences when I walk into that, then I'm never going to be able to do those. Adam, what's number two? Number two for leading cross-generational ministries, if you remember it, go ahead and share with the team.
Number two is use the strengths.
Ooh, okay, what do you think? What do you think that means?
I think it means, again, taking the blinders off, saying, what can this generation do right? I was reading an article that you had sent me on this earlier, and talking about, hey, some generations prefer a phone.
Yeah.
Some prefer an email.
100%.
Some prefer text.
Yeah.
Use the strengths, in different areas of communication with your team. Use the strengths in different areas of what people have learned in their generations and things like that. I think that's for sure huge.
Even going back to the financial stuff, man, like, who I want, like, helping with financial stability in a situation or organization? I want some people that have been there and have some harder questions, right?
For sure.
I don't want people that are just going to be like, oh yeah, like I've never carried dollar bills in my life, so I can just spend, and I don't know where it goes. Younger generations are like that.
Yeah.
But the older generations are like, hey, I remember when we didn't have to pay with our phone or these cards everywhere or online, and like I had cash in my hand, and once it was gone, it's gone. And I want them to help me with financial stability and control, you know, in those areas, right? And so it's like, use those strengths that generation has. By the way, if you're a silent generation or a boomer, or quite frankly, an Xer, you should probably be in tune with the technologically advanced generation of Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and millennials. Like, hey, find the millennial on your staff. Find the Gen Z on your staff and help you know that technologically advanced thing that you need to know that, by the way, will help you, right? Hey, here's a Todoist. Here's a task list. Here's some ways that you can use technology to your advantage. I know that you're prone to not want to do technology because I know the differences in our generation.
Sure.
But let me show you a strength of my generation that I can schedule out my time in a way that's actually going to help me, right? Use the strengths of the generations that are there. That's why we're given the differences, right? So that we can be a team and collaborate on those.
That's good.
The other thing is adapt where needed, right? That's number three. Like you got to identify the differences. You have to use the strengths, but then you also need to adapt where needed. Like I can't just make an all call based on one generational thing if my team is multi-generational or if the group I'm calling on is multi-generational, or if I'm going in for a sales presentation and I realize that like when I was in sales, we had newer doctors that were just out of residency and training and everything. And then we had some of guys that were like in the fourth quarter of their medical career, right? I had a totally different sales pitch to those two guys, right? And so, you've got to adapt where needed depending on the room that you are walking into and the generations that are there. This is not an all call. There is not a one size fits all to hit every single generation with everything. And so it's like, man, like I was at a meeting this weekend that had more of an older generation. I would probably typically make like PowerPoint presentations, have my iPad, put it on a TV, do all these types of things. But the generation and the people that I were walking into, they're a hard copy. Give me a hard copy. Let me carry a manila folder type of generation, right? So you know what I did? No PowerPoint presentation, no anything else. Boy, we had my bag was heavy that day because I was carrying all this paper of everything that we had to carry into, right? So I'm like, all right, but I know that they're going to mark it up. That's the way that they're going to do it best. You have to be able to adapt where needed depending on the generation. And then last but not least, Adam, what do we have?
Last but not least, accept the things that you can't change. And I think 3 and 4 here, before we talk about 4, have to do with just having an open heart and asking questions as well, of adapting where changing. The best leader of all time, we talk about him quite a bit around here. His name's Jesus. What did he do more than anything? He asked questions. And I think that's going to be huge as we go from number 3, adapting where needed, to accepting what you can't change, is just ask questions. Hey, what are some challenges that you or your generation has faced? How can I help? Just having that on the table, the simple how can I help question, right? I think that's huge, going into accepting what you can't change, which we'll talk about.
No, I mean, I think so. Like, you do have to accept like what you can't change, and like you're not going to be able to overcome all of those things, but you'd have to. And by the way, this is also on the other side. Maybe you're not the leader. Maybe you're a follower. Accept what you can't change from what comes in there, right? You can't just expect to only get hard copies of everything. You can't just expect to only get technology of everything, right? So we've got to be able to accept what we cannot change when it comes to this table. So this is on both sides. This is the leader and the follower in that. And then quickly, I just want to say this, like, we still need to make sure that we're challenging like the harmful areas of each generation. Like, hey, this is not helpful. I know your generation was this, but this was not good and this was not useful for your generation to do this. So that doesn't mean shy away from areas that we need to shy away from.
Yeah.
I'm not adapting everything and just succumbing to pressure of that. I need to make sure I challenge the areas that aren't useful for everybody. And as I'm even challenging those things, I also need to make sure I communicate, like, as a leader, if I'm elevating my leadership, I do need to communicate what my preferences are.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this is me. I'm 42-year-old Chris. This is what I'm prone to and accustomed to. This is the way I'm probably going to communicate. This is the way I'm probably going to do these things. If you need something different, let me know. But I'm just letting you know what my preferences are. This is the way I receive it best. Mm-hmm. This is the way I'm going to give it best, right?
Yeah.
And so making sure that we're constantly staying in that. The other thing is respect some boundaries that need to be in place, right? Like, I mean, like when you have a wide representation, you just need to set some guardrails.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
Respect guardrails.
Yeah.
And put those in place so that you're not going too loose one way or the other in terms of generational leadership and everything else. And then here's the like hardest one. Too often when it comes to generational leadership, we play favorites. And I love mine, or this next generation is the next generation that we're leading, so I need to just focus all my effort and attention on the next generation. I said this a lot, Adam, when we came to begin the process of church planting here in Denver. Too many church planters, in my opinion, only want to focus on reaching the young people in their community that look like them.
Yeah.
And when you live in a city where 95% of people are spiritually disconnected from Christ, that means that there are multi-generational people that are spiritually disconnected from Christ and dying and spending a Christless eternity. And so if I come in and I only want to reach the younger people because that's like my favorite generation to reach, I'm essentially saying that I'm okay with the older generations dying and being separated from Christ. And I just can't be.
Yeah.
And so like I can't be okay with someone that grew up in an unchurched environment, whose grandmother grew up in an unchurched environment, and they're dying and spending a Christless eternity. And so if I'm just like, I'm just going to reach the young ones. Well, number one, that's not biblical.
Right.
Number two, it's not even practical. And number three, it's not reaching the city that God's called you to reach.
Yeah.
And so multi-generational has to be a focus.
Right.
Like we have to reach all generations, which is why we'll try to get this thing on radio so that we can reach some generations. I'm just kidding. What do you want to add to any of that?
No, that's good. I mean, it's the mindset of we do not want Judges 2:10 to happen.
Oh gosh.
We don't want a generation to go without hearing the things that the Lord has done and without experiencing God in their own lives. And I think even too, like getting out of just in a ministry standpoint, even at work, like whatever it is that you do, man, you don't want your business to struggle because of a generational. You don't want like put it whatever in the blank there. We're better when everybody is working together.
100%.
And then I think too, just remembering that it's gonna be uncomfortable at times.
Yeah.
We were just in San Diego this past week for a conference, and something that Vance, we mentioned him earlier, that he says all the time is, hey, for multicultural, multi-generational churches and even organizations in general, if you're really pressing into that, it's going to be uncomfortable at times. There's going to be things that you're not used to, that they're not used to, that you're working together. But again, it's like we said earlier, that's what heaven's going to look like. And so we want to strive to look like that for sure.
It's easy for you because you're practically a Gen Z or trapped in a boomer's mindset.
100%, bro. 100%, bro. I'm a history
10 and
nerd.
10 and 2, guys.
Take
10
me
and 2
back
on the wheel.
to like,
10
like
and 2.
I read every plaque at museums because I love the
Listen.
older generation. I got a soft spot.
We took Adam to a battleship,
Oh man,
an aircraft carrier in San Diego, and he was more giddy than
was amazing.
everyone on the ship.
for sure.
Older than the age of
From where I'm
65 to
from, you
70.
say I was in hog heaven.
I was in hog heaven.
I was having a time.
If
man.
you-
we were there for an hour and a half. I was like, man, are we really leaving now?
If
When
you're
it was
listening-
time to leave. It still wasn't enough.
If you're listening or still watching after all of that, if you've seen the Progressive Insurance commercials where don't try to be like your parents,
Let's go.
I'm constantly coaching Adam in that.
For sure. For sure.
He's trying to figure out his phone and getting an airplane ticket on it. I'm just kidding. No, man, multi-generational approach. Here's my challenge to you. Take this and then go find someone that's older than you and younger than you in a generation and have a coffee or a meal with them. Go have a meal or a coffee or something with someone that is older than you in a generation and younger than you in a generation. Begin asking them questions. Hey, what are the differences that I need to know? What are the strengths that you have from your generation? Where do you think I need to adapt in my leadership, in terms of walking through and being a leader that leads multiple generational people? And then what do I need to just accept that I'm not going to change no matter what, right? What are some of these ways what boundaries do I need to set? Do I play favorites? Begin to ask those questions to those people. But
That's
man,
good.
hey, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope that you can elevate your leadership based on what God has called you to do, where he's called you to lead and lead out. And I cannot wait to see you next time as we have another edition and episode of Elevate Your Leadership podcast.